Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, which is brought to you by Shared Services Link in association with TradeShift. Today we're looking at the top 6 trends in purchase to pay for 2016. My name is Susie West and I am your host for today, and I'm very pleased to be presenting as my 2 guest speakers, a lady that I've known now for probably 7 or 8 years, Melanie Flores. She's the practice leader, procurement advisory EMEA at the Hackett Group, and is deeply expert within the world of purchase to pay and the KPIs within purchase to pay. So it is a privilege to have her joining us today. And we also have Vishal Patel, who is Head of Solutions Marketing at TradeShift. So great to have these 2 presenters with us. Let's have a look at what this webinar is about today. We talk a lot about purchase to pay at Shared Services Link. We also talk a lot about KPIs at Shared Services Link. So what's a little bit different about this webinar today? A couple of things. There's been a huge focus over the last 5-6 years on the KPIs that you really could and should be going for to be a top performer, and most shared services organizations are really striving to be top performers within the areas of electronic invoicing and dynamic discounting. And that's great, and I think a lot of us are familiar with what those KPIs are. We're going to be going over them, the updated KPIs that Hackett has been bringing together and consolidating over the last few months as well. So there are other KPIs that I'm really glad that we're talking about today. I think it's going to be great to be studying these, which is KPIs around the numbers of suppliers that you should really be aiming to have per billion of spend. I think this is a great KPI, and I think it's a KPI that not a lot of shared service organisations have been putting huge focus on in the last few years. So I think one takeaway from this webinar today could perhaps be adopting that KPI. I do think it's a key one, it's a chief one. And also looking at the blended channel strategy that you have within your overall process to alleviate risk. So I'm really pleased that we're going to be looking at these 2 areas and other areas as well. This webinar is a very concrete look at 6 trends that top performers within purchase to pay are generally applying. So I'd now like to hand over to Melanie. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you for the opportunity to participate today. We're going to be looking at the 6 top trends. And before that, I just wanted to give you a very brief overview in terms of, what Hackett does, but in particular about, some of the methodology that we use in terms of defining top performers. So if you can look at, the portfolio of our solutions, I think you are pretty much aware of that. So I'm not going to spend much time on these. Pretty much our heritage in benchmarking, because of that, we really have a lot of data. But the question about the data and the KPIs is what do you do with those? So we help organizations through our consulting and advisory solutions. Now, let us go into a little bit more detail in terms of some of the metrics that I'm going to be sharing with you. And therefore is relevant this picture. We can spend a day talking about it, but I just wanted you to understand what is the background of some of the metrics that you are going to be looking at. So we define actually world-class performance for a particular function, such as procurement and finance, but we also define what a top performer is in an end-to-end process, and this is the case for us in purchase to pay. So what you're looking at is the purchase to pay value grid that we have created, and we assess in a similar methodology to all the world-class and top performer assessment that we conduct, the 2 dimensions, efficiency and effectiveness. And in the slide you can see the type of metrics that we included, the type of areas that we consider within the efficiency and the effectiveness side. It's clear that purchase to pay is very much about, it's a transactional in nature process, and therefore efficiency has been very important. But nowadays, more and more is about the value that the purchase to pay can bring to the rest of the, the functions that is working together with, finance and procurement, but in general to the rest of the business, and also some other internal and external stakeholders such as suppliers. So, when I'm talking about the top performer, I'm really talking about the median of those organizations that manage to get to that top quartile performance in both dimensions. So with that, let me just go into some of the examples and what world-class or top performers are doing in purchase to pay. And as we know, purchase to pay is really an end-to-end process, and organizations have different definitions in terms of where the process starts and where the process ends. And to a certain extent, this is one of the key trends. Having said that, I wouldn't necessarily say that there is an absolutely new trend. You see the 6 performers, they already have a designated end-to-end purchase-to-pay process owner and 44 of the rest of the organization. So this is actually quite well known, and the challenges or the differences start, and the challenges are coming with the difference as well in terms of how this is defined. Some organizations are going even beyond the purchase to pay, and they are saying, well, actually, it's source to settle. And there are some important points around having this end-to-end view, but, strong alignment is key, and having that designated owner helps in a number of areas to address issues such as compliance and to help with performance. And at the end of the day, having this end-to-end view is also driving and creating some opportunities for the purchase-to-pay organizations. So if you think about those top performers, a large majority of them are working on the end-to-end, process view, but what are some of the characteristics that they have? So let me take you to some of the KPIs in terms of what are they doing. So if you could see that, for example, top performers are much faster at placing orders and processing invoices. So this is one of the characteristics, and I'm picking only 3 of the metrics in this efficiency side of the equation of performance for purchase to pay. So while the purchase order cycle time is clearly in hours, we have 5 to 15 hours. It's a pretty important gap. Same with the invoice cycle time that, top performers have managed to shorten this. And clearly there are several reasons why this is the case. And, if you can think about clearly the processes that they have, the policies, the technology that they are using is also playing an important point. You see one of those elements in the screen is around the PO-based invoices that they receive. So many organizations have been working hard in getting these right, and it's paying off. But it's not only about having all the transactions in the POs. It's a little bit more complex than that. But in a nutshell, top performers are clearly some organizations that are able to place orders and process invoices much faster than the rest, which help them in doing other type of, providing other type of services that we're going to be looking at in a moment. Now, in terms of cost, some of you have been tracking the cost of the transaction, and we have been doing this for already a number of years. What I'm showing you right now is actually the process cost. And in Hackett's definition, this is the labor plus the outsourcing for top performers. So I'm not showing you what the rest of the organizations are doing. But I think that the point that I want to make here is that clearly top performers have been addressing reducing the process cost around the key transactions that they manage. And we know that there are some other transactions, if you will, that we could include. But in principle, they have been very good in doing this. But we see a difference between the process cost per invoice and per order. By purchase orders, we have seen over the years that this is really going down. In the case of the accounts payable, the key process cost per invoice, this is actually flattening, and we see that there is a more attention and focus in other areas around effectiveness and delivering more value. And this is definitely one of the trends that I'm going to be discussing with you. But considering this is some of the key characteristics of top performers, so what is happening outside? And this webcast is about the trends. So we see more and more, and we run a number of studies asking executives in the procurement area, but also in finance and also in HR, etc. What is happening outside? And we are living very interesting times, and I'm sure all of you have seen and have been exposed to that and are probably thinking about how this is potentially bringing some challenges for us, but also some opportunities. And if you see this wheel, it's actually for a company. It's not particular to the purchase-to-pay organizations, but companies are telling us we see a number of things happening on the outside. There is extreme volatility in the markets, and this is impacting us. We see hyper competition in the marketplace, and again, I'm talking about the company or the enterprise as such. So we see a lot of disruptive innovation. And all these changes have an impact to the companies, and certainly they need to react. And I just putting some of the key trends in the marketplace that are happening, some of those disruptive innovations, some of these new things that are coming, that as I said, some of you might be quite active in some of them, some others might want to understand what is happening and how this might impact them. And we see mobility. This is one of the areas that we see more and more purchase-to-pay organizations having to enabling their internal customers in the purchasing side or in the accounts payable side, that interaction, having to do this because more and more people are running with a mobile in their hands and they can do something. So mobility is an important trend. Analytics is definitely massive, and the opportunities are there, and technology is there, similar to big data. More and more we see that technology, organizations are getting more access to them. Prices as well for technology are getting reduced to what it was in the past in terms of cloud and all those new options, robotics, etc. So there is a number of opportunities and a number of trends that are included in here. If you think also about millennials, there's an interesting time to be in. Now, all these changes that are happening on the outside that are impacting our companies, so how they are impacting us in terms of the purchase to pay. And this is, as such, one important area of focus that we see organizations. It's not anymore internally how we can go about, driving the cost down of our transactions. And it's actually purchase-to-pay organizations being part of the entire company, helping to cope and, if possible, take advantage of some of the things that are happening on the outside. So purchase-to-pay organizations need to definitely help support these agile enterprise, agile organizations nowadays. So having this in mind, so what are the key trends that are important from a purchase-to-pay point of view? And I'm going to go through each of them, so I don't want to spend much time on these, but it is about taking advantage some of the things that I was saying just before. And how can we support business agility as companies required to be more agile, and purchase to pay has a role in supporting that. Definitely, there is a lot of opportunities in terms of analytics and big data. Represents also some challenges for organizations on how to go about that and how the master data is working in order just to go for the next step. But it's important as well to be able to give more visibility and more capabilities to the business, protect the business from risk. There is definitely purchase to pay is one of the gates of interacting with the outside world, and therefore it's important to be doing that. And close link to this, and making compliance work. I think compliance has been one of the things, it's not new as such, but there are some elements that also because of new technology and some of the opportunities that we see in the marketplace, we can have a fresh look at making compliance finally work for us. Cost and cash objectives are important. Companies, when we are asking them for companies, it's very important. The cost focus is again quite high in the agenda of companies and CFOs and definitely CPOs, etc. So purchase to pay has an important role to play there. And becoming customer-centric is also, if you will, a new trend in purchase to pay in terms of what organizations are doing around that. So now let me take you through some of the elements of each of these ones. And let me start with supporting business agility. Now, if you think about some of these trends, what are the tactics and best practices that purchase-to-pay organizations are taking on that? And some of them are not necessarily new as such, and this is the case of process automation, as organizations have been going a lot of trying to make improvements and use the opportunities available. So in terms of electronic transactions and process automation, I think you have seen how these figures have been changing, these benchmarks have been changing over time. And no-touch orders, the purchasing side, it's increasing. If you're a top performer, we are talking around 70% of your orders are no-touch. We can debate about terminology and definitions, but it is really minimal intervention from the purchasing organization. Electronic invoices, still a massive gap. We see organizations having to do, being very active with onboarding and picking all the different solutions that they require, as you might have some vendors that will be sending you 2 or 3 invoices a month, while others you have a very large volume. So there are different approaches, but clearly electronic invoices is still very important. Electronic payments for organizations that have European operations, this is clear, this is not anymore best practice, it's absolutely a common practice. If you have operations as a global organization in other regions, then you see that it's a little bit more challenging to get there, but we still see a very good development. So process automation is clearly a very important point. Now, let me take you to other aspect of this. It is about the connectivity strategies that organizations are using. So, I'm showing you the top performer and the peer, the type of connectivity strategies that they are using. We see basic and manual. Even the top performers, they are real organizations. They still have basic and manual ways of connecting. Having said that, we see that it's absolutely growing the advanced, in particular, the more advanced ways of doing web-based solutions for accounts payable connectivity, which is enabling a number of areas. So clearly one of the trends that we continue to see this growing because of the benefits that it could bring. Okay, let me take you through the areas taking advantage of big data. And it's actually about this trend that we see in digitalization of information. And there are several tactics here that are applicable to the purchase-to-pay organization. You can have a look at some of them, but I really want to touch base in particular one that is very important, which is about driving visibility with analytics. And as you remember that I was saying, more and more organizations are looking at beyond their cost per transaction and how they can add value. And some of the areas that organizations are doing this and linked to the digitalization of information is about spend visibility. And in this case, we see a massive difference already today in terms of the spend visibility at the line item level, which can enable a number of activities also in the sourcing organizations, so helping in the value chain. Now, if we have a look at the metric in terms of the active number of suppliers, the top performers already benefit for having a reduced supply base, a more concentrated supplier base, and also a cleaner supplier master file. And this is one of the areas that hits everybody pretty much in the company if it's not working well. So it's very important to have a lower number of suppliers. You are leveraging your spend much better from a sourcing point of view, but also from a purchase to pay point of view. If you see in the right-hand side of your screen the percent of suppliers that are making the majority of the invoices, it's quite different, 4.5 to 8, and this has clearly some implications into the efficiency of your teams and also the solutions that you are going to put in place. So quite important and clearly a trend for organizations. So if you're going to make these massive onboardings and you're going to be working with suppliers, having a concentrated supplier base helps definitely. Now, I wanted to bring it to another area, which has to do with big data and the advantages of having visibility of spend aligned to the line spend savings and what is happening in the end-to-end process. And what I'm showing you here are the percentage of savings lost because of non-compliance. Pretty much what we are talking about here is for those spend categories, we have sourcing managers actually outside of the P2P organization that identified and negotiated some savings that unfortunately get lost on the realized savings that they see after execution of those contracts, after the transactions are coming in, is decreasing by around 5 to 8% more or less, depending on the spend categories that we are talking about. So it's quite important. Purchase to pay is in the middle of the process, and having visibility to this definitely can help and contribute to the purchase to pay and the value added in the procurement area. Okay, so let us go to the next trend. And then I actually put two together because there is a close link between them. One of them is protecting the business from risk. So we ask companies and executives across the companies are telling us it is very important. We have new regulations. We just need to be sure that we have, we are protected. At the same time, we want to make compliance finally work for purchase to pay. And And I'm giving you a series of tactics that are used in this area, helping to get into the balance and manage and protect the business from risk. But let me take you to this, which is, I think, is the core of what we do in Purchase to Pay. And it's about an architected channel strategy that actually starts from the commodity, from what you are buying, goods and services, and it's really intended to balance the risk associated with acquiring and paying with the controls that you have, so that you maximize efficiency. And there are many of these channels that are optimal from an efficiency point of view, and others that are optimal from a control point of view, an optimal control. So if you would have everything in three-way match, is the maximum control you can have. But certainly, what you don't want is typically the most expensive one. So there is the right combination in getting that right balance. There are some channels that have, that are better used for different type of spend. So definitely we see companies moving away from having the exception list of how we're going to buy and pay this, and moving to this is the standard strategy based on what we are buying. And from there, tracking compliance, etc. Definitely you want to minimize the invoice only, and you start working with the workflow backwards. In terms of protecting the business from risk, we also see some trends in terms of what top performers are doing for detecting, reporting, and recovering, and in general fraud risk. You see again the difference between top performance and the rest of organizations. We see more and more advanced solutions that we still see some organizations doing nothing. And top performance, we see recover twice the value through accounts payable, recover audit compared to others. So, systems is one way of doing this, more advanced, more efficient fraud and error detection. Now, there is another point which I haven't talked about, which is the supplier onboarding. And all of you, or many of you, are involved in onboarding suppliers, potentially only for a particular solution that you have put in place, might be your electronic invoices. But in general, supplier onboarding programs are addressing supplier onboarding for not a particular solution, rather how to onboard suppliers and for doing business with you. And Purchase to Pay is really at the front of this. The changes that we are seeing is we are moving away from the traditional vendor master file type of focus. We have our fields that we have in the master file that allow us to conduct the typical transactions, and it's going beyond that in terms of the supplier lifecycle management and making sure that we put the right controls and validation points. It might be sustainability type of questions and control points that you are going to include there. So the entire supplier onboarding is going beyond just making the connectivity as such and just the vendor master file, and actually going into supplier lifecycle management and all the potentially some solutions are available there in order to integrate and to onboard suppliers into our organization, but making sure that it's validated and that the controls are put in place. Now, let me go to the next one in terms of contributing to cost and cash objectives. And I included two of them, which tactics for Purchase to Pay, which actually, just this one, the first one, we could spend a day talking about that. And it's going beyond the typical, which is still relevant, transactional cost. So on the left-hand side, you see how Purchase to Pay organizations are evolving their value proposition and moving from very much process cost focus to enabling other areas and getting into different type of role as well and evolving the value proposition. Now, what I'm showing you in the right-hand side is that we made an analysis based on organizations in the consumer goods, and we went there in a very detail in terms of understanding what improvements could come from a Purchase to Pay point of view. If you see, 8% of all the performance improvements that we found were linked to the process cost reduction. Definitely, 42 were associated with purchase cost reduction, capital cost, transactional quality cost, etc. So there is an important opportunity here for organizations, and as you are more advanced, the majority of the more advanced organizations have the opportunity to go and to convince and work with the other partners in the company to address some of those issues and actually make it quite successful. So adding value is definitely a trend, and it might vary in which area you are going to go, depending on your specifics or your organization. Some organizations are looking into cash Nowadays, as we see things happening in the economies, we see more and more organizations also focusing in cash, and you see standard term supply is an important point. And obviously, global organizations being in different regions with different cultures might have, we are not talking about everybody going only one particular payment term, but it's about standardizing that and profiting from that from an effectiveness point of view and efficiency. And then we see linked to these early payment discounts taken, there are some available, which organizations are going behind those and clearly aligned to the end-to-end, source to settle partners within the company, and also the days payable outstanding. If you see 23 days difference between top performers and the peers at the bottom quartile, it makes actually a big difference. So let's go with the last of the 6 trends that we are covering today, and it's about becoming customer-centric. So organizations have realized purchase to pay is the same if you talk about, for example, finance with the business partner agenda. I mean, they have been doing this already for a number of years. Or you talk about procurement in terms of the building the account managers for key budget owners. So there is an important development there in terms of becoming customer-centric. And the question is, what is in for purchase to pay? And there are different options that you could take, and there are a number of tactics that you could use, streamlining policies, enabling self-service, etc. And, I want to take you through some of these. If you look at the chart that I'm showing you, it's clear that organizations, in terms of line items, the usage of e-catalogs is important. And we know there are some challenges depending on the spend that you manage, the type of goods and services in particular that you are buying. But definitely we see it's a clear opportunity for many organizations to expand this and, moving away from having to work with free text type of requisitions and just enabling these organizations and the requisitioners to do that. Now, also about putting the internal customers and internal stakeholders at the center, it's also about driving them to the right place in terms of the top performance, what they're doing, driving requisitions to the preferred channel, to the preferred supplier, and the right price. So this is absolutely fundamental for getting some of the value. You see top performers are 85% effectively doing that. And when we talk about compliance and monitoring compliance, it's not monitoring compliance exclusively to that PO, do we have it or not, and rather going specifically to that channel strategy that I was talking to and monitoring compliance to that defined strategy. So let me go with my last slide in terms of all the type of things that are done in terms of putting the internal stakeholder. And this is a different area, but I just show you that it's not only the purchasing side, but also in the accounts payable side, so tracking invoice, inquiry response times. We see when we are asking organizations, are you doing this? Well, actually, there is a room for improvement for everybody, but definitely peers are still lagging behind tracking the time of the inquiry response. And it's about providing a good service. At the end of the day, purchase to pay tends to be in a shared service center organization, and it's about providing the right levels of service. So I think we went through a lot of material, but let me hand over to Vishal to take you some of the interesting things around the technology piece.
Thank you, Melanie, and thanks for the excellent presentation. I thought it was a lot of really good information. I'm sure our audience has really enjoyed this. From our side at TradeShift, we really identify with a lot of those trends and the way we think about our product and our solutions and what we are also hearing from our customers. So what I'd like to do now is just give you a very quick intro into TradeShift. Of course, the solutions we provide are quite closely tied to the procure-to-pay process and more. However, we do have a unique approach to the challenges faced in this area. So first and foremost, what we really are as TradeShift is a network. And when you think about other networks like LinkedIn that people use every day to connect to their professional networks, TradeShift is used by buyers and suppliers to connect to each other. And once these trading partners are connected, they can really work together on all of the procure-to-pay processes and other supplier-related processes. They can communicate and collaborate directly with each other through this network. Secondly, what we are on the next slide is a platform. So what this means is that not only do our customers have access to all the solutions offered by us as TradeShift, they also have access to an entire ecosystem of apps. So these apps, they're third-party solutions. Even customers themselves can build their own apps on the platform. So what you see here is, think about the different business processes and interactions between one buyer and all of their suppliers. No one solution provider can cater to all of these business processes, but an entire ecosystem of connected apps that specialize in particular areas of automation and business processes, all of this working in a connected ecosystem can really provide all of that for those trading partners on a single platform. I mentioned that the solutions that Tradeshift offers, one is Tradeshift Risk. So this is a full supplier management solution. It helps with supplier information management, compliance, and supplier risk. We offer Tradeshift Buy, which is our e-procurement solution. With this, your suppliers can make their products and services available to your company at your agreed upon price. It really is a full e-commerce experience with a modern shopping cart, procurement help features, purchase order creation, approval, and so on. The third is of course, as part of the procure-to-pay solution, is a complete AP automation solution. And this provides e-invoicing capabilities to you and your suppliers, and it includes all of the necessary workflow and business rules and integration to your back-end system that you would need, really, for a comprehensive procure-to-pay solution. And then lastly is the apps, which I just mentioned, that our partners and customers themselves build. These allow customers to extend their usage of Tradeshift into areas like dynamic discounting or supply chain finance, or even into more direct materials supply chain related areas. So in the next couple of slides, this just gives you a feel of how our solutions look and the simplicity that they offer. So what you see here is how a supplier that is connected to you would update their information, like their address or bank account or compliance information. Once they make an update on their own profile, that information is shared with the specific buyers that they're connected with, and the buyer gets a notification, and they have to basically approve this change in information. And once approved on the buyer side, then this makes the change automatically on the ERP system of the buyer. So you can see how the way information is managed and shared is really different once you're connected on a network. On the next slide here, you'll see a sneak peek of our e-procurement solution. So this shows you how a user would search for items and add them to a cart. Now this search is across all of the products and services that are available to you as a buyer from your suppliers. And what you can also do is include free text orders, or you can even request help from your procurement group as a user for certain items. Now all of this can be added to your shopping cart, and then the shopping cart basically is sent around for approval, and after it's approved, it's turned into a purchase order and then sent out to all of the relevant suppliers. So just a view of how a user experiences actually buying items on Tradeshift. And then the last thing I wanted to show you is, when we talk about workflow, here you can see the way that a procurement team of suppliers, managers, requisitioners, they can all collaborate together. They can, using this chat type of functionality, and within this process you can approve, you can reject, you can comment on items during the entire buying process. And what you see here is a CFO actually leveraging what we call an insight card to help them make a better decision on whether to approve an item or reject an item. So we're providing information on whether this item is over budget or not, and the CFO is using that to reject the item because it's actually over budget. So you can see how we are leveraging information at the point of a decision being made. So just to finish off the last couple of slides, we're going back to a moment for the apps, and this shows you some of the apps that we have in our ecosystem, and you'll notice these are companies that have their own solutions, but they are building these capabilities on the Tradeshift platform. The next slide, you'll see some of the companies we work with. We work with some of the largest companies in the world. We are a global company with presence in the US, in Europe, in Asia. And overall, on the last slide, what I'd like to leave you with is the fact that we build software that is meant to change as your needs change. It's designed for people. It's designed to be simple and intuitive. So everything we do really takes into account your business and your entire network of suppliers, how you connect to them, and how your users connect to them as well. And then how can you all collaborate and be agile and be data-driven together in this ecosystem. That's a really quick overview of Tradeshift. I have my contact info there if you have any questions, but I'll hand it over to Susie.
Thank you very much to Melanie and Vishal. That was great. We are out of time. So Melanie Flores and Vishal Patel, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us. It's been great having you join us today. We look forward to next time. Thank you and goodbye.